So welcome everybody to the September Community Connector webinar. Here's our agenda for the evening. Size indicates the length of time we'll be spending on it. So we'll have a land acknowledgement. I'll do a quick summary of our MNIPL listening project this summer, and then we'll have some time for breakout rooms. We'll do one set of breakout rooms. We can visit with one another. Then we'll take a pause, and I'll give you a few MNIPL updates, and then we'll go for another breakout room, and then we'll have a closing. So depending on how many people we have, we might finish up a little sooner than a full hour, but we'll see how that goes. So take a moment, if you will, and settle yourself into a posture that's comfortable and place of reverence, if you like. And let's remember that wherever we are in Minnesota, we acknowledge that we are all on indigenous land. Minnesota is located on the traditional and contemporary homelands of the Anishinaabe and Dakota peoples, the original stewards of this territory. We acknowledge the trauma that's deeply embedded in the foundation of our country. The land we reside on came under control of the USA through genocide, slavery, and ongoing occupation. We recognize the historical, spiritual, and personal trauma that has impacted indigenous communities, communities of color, and immigrant communities especially, and really all of us. And by offering this acknowledgement, we affirm the right of people to bring their whole selves and stories into this space, and we affirm our intention to promote healing, respect, and love. Thank you for joining me in that land acknowledgement. A reminder that you all are part of the climate justice interfaith movement across Minnesota, and you are part of empowering others to be part of that movement. We believe at MNIPL that people of faith have this unique role to play in the climate movement. We already have these existing communities that are built on relationships of trust. Our religions and our traditions, our spiritualities teach us to care for each other and for our common home, the earth, and we have an impact on culture and decision makers. So as community connectors, you can see you're a real linchpin in this work that we have together. Community connectors serve as a liaison between MNIPL and their congregation. You tell us what's going on so we can respond to you all better. And we tell you options and resources that you have to join in. So if you haven't kind of made it official and you'd like to, it's easy to do. I'll drop the link in the chat. And you can just follow that at any time and sign up officially if you aren't already signed up. You can expect from us to get an email responding to you that invites you to set up a half-hour phone call and tell us about yourself and your community. We do invitations regularly to come up to Community Connector webinars like this. We offer a monthly action alert for things that you can just drop into your bulletins or your newsletters or things like that, little monthly Spark notifications. We support, you can get support from Movement Builders at any kind of rate that you want. You can talk to us regularly. We're happy to meet with you. We have drop-in Zoom hours. You can drop in and talk with us every Thursday at noon, or you can schedule a time to meet with a staff person and talk about what's going on in your community, in your congregation, and what you'd like to do. And you get to be part of a statewide climate justice movement. So you get to connect with other folks that are doing this work, and that's going to be the main focus of tonight's gathering. Before we get to that though, I'd like to give a little summary of a really important project that happened this summer. We hosted 5 students from the University of North Carolina, rising sophomores. And these were particular scholars at the University of North Carolina. They're Morehead Cain Scholars, happens to be the oldest merit-based scholarship in the US. And we had a team of 5. We were one of 13 sites across the country that hosted teams like this. And we asked this team to help us learn more about the work we do by interviewing people like you. In fact, there might be some folks on this call that got to talk to this team and responded to the interview options. This team spent 4 weeks kind of learning about our organization, what we do, how we do it, and developing a set of interview questions to gather information from folks like you who are community connectors. Then they spent 5 weeks calling and talking, doing 30-minute or more interviews with each community connector. They were able to speak with 40 community connectors, so a pretty good sample. And then they gave us a final report. And I'm just going to go through the kind of top level trends in what we found from that report, what they discovered. This group was Laurel from Maryland, Virginie from Quebec City, Canada, Luke from Charlotte, North Carolina, Graham from Brevard, North Carolina, and Isabella from Toronto. So eclectic group with a good wide variety of perspectives. They spoke with 4 folks up in the northeast part of our state, a couple of people in St. Cloud, and most of the interviews were conducted here locally in the Twin Cities. They did meet with our Brett Pence, our director of our Northland, Greater Minnesota Northland area, and they did go to the Headwaters gathering. So they did get a feel for the larger state. Most of the congregations that they spoke with were either Christian or Unitarian Universalists. So we want to be careful to note that, and to note that this particular set of responses might not be indicative of other faiths. We were curious to know if most of the people that they spoke with would know what our name Community Connector meant. And so to see if we were on deck with this nomenclature that we use, this name Community Connector. And we were happy to see that for the most part, people knew that name and understood how it fit in what we're trying to do as an organization. And more importantly, what the role is and how those folks fit into the larger movement across the state. It was interesting that a little more than half of those interviewed were working on a climate action plan in their congregation, but that wasn't necessary to congregations moving forward and being involved in the climate justice movement. So here are the top level trends for successes that the students saw. The top successes that Community Connectors reported were local practical actions. So these would be things like starting a composting program or a recycling program, or planting trees on the church or congregational property, or starting a waste reduction or limiting plastic usage. Those type of projects were really high on the success scale. Other congregations also reported high success with going solar or getting into solar community gardens, and speakers were number 3 on the list. Having a speaker come and present, or even someone in the congregation speaking about climate change. This graph gives all the kind of top things that registered on, as successes in congregations. You can see that number 4 parallels the solar additions at congregations, improving church buildings. And a lot of those same congregations that installed solar had already done energy improvement at their congregations. So if you put those 2 things together, they would be pretty large. And we found that a lot of congregations found that to be a very successful pathway to go, especially during the pandemic, when groups of gatherings were harder to do. The resources that led to success were reported. The top 3 were our Be the Spark training and the webinars that we provide, really focusing on the spiritual connection at the congregation. Congregations that had good success found that when they talked about care for creation and other values that their congregation, had embedded in their teachings and in their worship, they really succeeded, and that was an important part of that. And then a number of congregations reported a good connection to a staff person on our staff, helped them succeed at things that they did. Here again is the larger list with some other items listed. You can see other organizations support was equally as important as connecting with an MNIPL staff, whether it was MN250 or Sierra Club. So that shows that, MNIPL is in an ecosystem of groups working on this issue, and that people and congregations don't rely solely on MNIPL, but are working with other organizations too. We think that's great. We really like to see that. When community connectors were asked about the barriers, things that kept them from succeeding and making action on climate, they named these top 3 things. And I should say the one that was clear above everyone, and almost every single person that spoke named the pandemic as the top one. So we kind of took that off the list because it affected everybody. But the next 3 were having few people engaged in the green team or the climate justice team. That was a real tough one for folks to get over. Or facing low attendance among events and other gatherings that green teams tried to put together for their congregation. And then 3rd, which I think was an important one, it was interesting to see, lacking youth engagement was a barrier. And people noticed that when they really wanted to have younger participation on their teams. Again, showing the larger list, you can see COVID way out there ahead of everything. And then the next 3 that I just spoke about, almost at the same rate, were politics being a factor, a friction factor, and exhaustion and burnout. We just saw that a lot of congregations had a lot of demands on them for a long time, especially with the pandemic, and that with participation maybe waning, there just weren't enough people to do as many things as the congregation had embraced, and that was a barrier. Hopefully we can, we're coming past the pandemic, and we can move towards a place that gives us more, more energy and more participation by folks in our congregations. Finally, one of the last areas that the team asked about was what worked, or what were factors that were engaged about congregational leadership? How did that play a role in barriers or bridges to action in the community? And the top, looking really good was that almost 70% of the community connectors polled said they had strong supportive leadership from their faith community leader. And that could be construed in a lot of different ways. That might be a clergy person, somebody who's designated, or it might be someone that's a lay leader or otherwise has some authority in the congregation. But having that leadership support was good to see that a large number of our congregations do have that. It was important to note that 1/3 of the congregations interviewed were in some kind of leadership transition. And we know that can be a challenge for congregations to continue moving forward on efforts that they've been strong on when they're facing a transition. So, we on staff are doing some deeper interviewing and discussion with clergy and other leaders to understand how can MNIPL support congregations when they're going through a leadership transition. Finally, it was really valuable to see leaders stepping up and giving sermons on this topic. We didn't ask specifically how congregational leaders were addressing. It was just the fact that they did address creation care or climate change in some way. We did know that some congregations reported low tangible involvement by their leadership. They might be, in word, supportive, but they might not actually step up and do something specifically. And that there were some congregations that described having a structure that's non-hierarchical, and that was just an important attribute and characteristic of their congregation. Finally, we found 3 important trends connecting in what resources MNIPL has that have been effective for congregations and for community connectors. Those were connecting congregations to one another. So helping congregations either within their kind of denomination perhaps, or their group of faith communities, know what other congregations are doing and how they're doing similar work, and connect them to one another. Providing clear action steps, helping congregations have a climate action plan and think through what actions might be really good contextually with their people. And finally, showing case studies and opportunities to learn from others, whether that was written or meetings like this, and examples of what congregations are doing. Here you can see the larger graph that charts those items of how MNIPL helped. So one of the biggest things we heard from folks was that you all want to know each other better. We want more cross-pollination. Community connectors want to connect with one another and not always have content delivered on these webinars. Or we want to create a space where people can just talk with one another and understand what we're doing and share resources together. So that's the idea behind this webinar, is that we would make space for that. And so what I'd like to do now is, let's see, I'll stop recording. So let me go back to recording and share my screen here. So I hope that breakout session was good and gave you somebody to meet and talk with and get to know another community connector. We'll have another one of those sessions in just a minute to finish up. But let me go into some MNIPL updates. We have 3 major updates we want to bring to your attention. The first is our fall campaign for voter conversations. And these are easy, do-it-yourself online videos that you can take part in. They help you have conversations about climate. And if you've listened to Katharine Hayhoe's work, she always says the most important thing you can do is talk about climate change, make it normative, remind people that it's happening, it's part of our lives, and we need to respond to it. So these little do-it-yourself videos kind of help you, just help you either do this on your own or help organize people in your community to do that. And here I'll drop this link in the chat. You'll get an email with all these links. But we have a special person on our call tonight who is joining MNIPL staff starting tomorrow. And he was nice enough to come on our webinar today, and that's Joshua Lewis. Joshua, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Buff. Hi, everyone. I'm Joshua. I'm joining as the Climate Justice Organizer, and I'm excited to get to apply some of the principles I've learned in 7 years of labor organizing and get out the vote and voter persuasion and fundraising and training organizers to climate justice with that faith foundation, that foundation of what our value systems are to address what is the biggest problem that we're facing collectively, and hopefully move toward the direction of humanity collectively becoming better stewards of that source from which we come from.
All right, thanks, Joshua. Well, we're thrilled that Joshua's coming on staff. For those of you who knew Carissa, Carissa kind of kicked off this campaign, and Joshua's picking up the baton and going to carry it forward to Election Day. And remember, we don't advocate for any particular candidate, but this is a way that we can advocate for an issue. And that's wholly within our nonprofit bailiwick. We can do that with no problem. And Joshua's going to help continue to lead this campaign going forward. So thanks, Joshua, and thanks a lot for joining the call. We look forward to you all hearing a lot more from Joshua over the coming months. Our other campaign that we're running this fall is the fighting the utility rate hikes. If you don't know, Xcel Energy has asked for a 21% rate hike from the Public Utilities Commission. This is something that's totally fair for them to do. They can ask for anything they want as far as rate hikes, but that doesn't mean we necessarily have to give it to them. And there's a public process with the Public Utilities Commission to engage this. We can make comments as public citizens about what we think about them seeking a 21% rate hike. Right now, their CEO is getting a salary of about $22 million per year, and profits are pretty good for Xcel. So we don't think that that is a time for them to get a 21% rate hike. This campaign will give you a lot of information about how to make a public comment and information that we think is valuable in a climate justice perspective for things that we as people of conscience and faith ought to be advocating for. So it's an easy process to get involved in. I dropped the link in the chat. Again, we'll follow up with an email with this link so you can engage that. There's some public comment places. There's ways to educate your congregation and to advocate for those who already pay, a big portion of their electrical bills, a big portion of their income for electrical bills. Lastly, our last campaign I want to let you know about is the fall campaign for loss and damage. And this is in the lead up to COP27, which is the Conference of Peoples. The 27th Conference of Peoples at the United Nations. This one is going to be held in Cairo in Egypt. And loss and damage is a particularly unique justice issue around global justice for climate. And we'll be rolling out this campaign, in the next couple of weeks. Our October webinar will be about this, so you can learn more about this and how you can get involved. So that covers the updates for now. And I thought we'd take another breakout session if you like. Why don't we just finish up in the last 15, 20 minutes here, instead of having breakout sessions with duos. Why don't we just go around the circle here, and you all can kind of list yourself and which congregation you're involved in, and if you want to respond at all to the summary of the listening project that we had, or if you want to talk about something from your former breakout session that you just had, whatever you want to share with one another, let's just have this as open sharing time. And to start with, I'll just go around the circle to make it easy and everybody get a chance. Let's see, Doug, you're at the top of my screen. What, you want to weigh in, introduce yourself and say something about your congregation?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Good seeing some familiar faces and some new ones. Joshua, happy to have you on the MNIPL team. Welcome aboard. But yeah, I'm Doug Mensing. I'm with St. John's Episcopal Church in the Linden Hills neighborhood of Minneapolis. We've had a green team for a long time. It's transitioned more into a group that we call Earth Matters. And I've been kind of the chair of that for many years now. And we've had many successes and a number of failures as well, or things that we've learned from, I should say, not call them failures, but MNIPL has been a great partner over the many years. We've had lots of opportunities to benefit from their mentoring and programs and be the spark, et cetera. and really appreciate the role that they've played in supporting our work. Because I guess I felt lonely at times, and I think a number of you maybe have felt lonely at times leading these groups. And so it's nice to have a group like MNIPL there that has actual people and support and knowledge and resources to help with that. So just want to say kudos to MNIPL. Appreciate what you guys do. Really important work. I think it's a great model, and look forward to more of the programs you have coming up here later in the year in the fall. So thanks, Buff.
Thanks, Doug. Let's see. Elizabeth Johns, you're next on my Zoom configuration. Do you want to introduce yourself and say something about being a community connector, or however you're configured in your work?
I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm a relatively, a one-year member of the First Congregational Church here, First Congregational Church, UCC. I don't know if I can call myself a community connector, but I know somebody who is. She and I work together on our church's green team. And I'm a relatively new member of that, but I know she's been discouraged by sort of feeling like she's putting a lot of energy and effort into creating these programs and doing this educational work, and not getting a lot of buy-in, or seeming, not feeling like she's getting a lot of buy-in from the congregation. And so we came up with the idea of doing a survey of the congregation, and we heard about the one that you folks were working on and said, oh, maybe we'll learn from you because that's something we're thinking about doing this fall. And we haven't quite got it put together yet. So we're open to ideas. And I'd be really interested to hear from other people what you think we should be, what's realistic for us to expect. Are we expecting too much? Are we doing the right thing? Are we not doing enough of the right things? What does a successful congregation look like? And what could we be aspiring to once we figure out the best way of making that happen?
Yeah, anybody want to jump in and make a comment about Elizabeth's question with respect to your own community? Or
well, how to reply on that is, if it's growing, I mean, are you doing a little better this year than you were last year? If you're doing a little better next year than you're doing this year, that's the only way we really can gauge it. And as long as we're moving forward and not backwards,
Well, I think we have a flat line at the moment, and probably
well, you're
COVID,
not going down.
COVID probably has something to do with that. And I just don't have the history as a new member of the church, so I don't know. But yeah, we should certainly pay attention to which way the line is going.
I would offer up in my experience, it's I think it makes a lot of sense to focus on doing one or a couple things well and not trying to do a million things. And MNIPL has kind of been helpful with that, setting out goals and not shooting too high, because there's always way more need and way more ideas out there than there are time and volunteers to do them, in my experience. So figuring out, whatever those, whatever 3 goals or something for a year, whatever works for your congregation, but then trying to find a champion. And it doesn't always have to be you, Elizabeth. It has, trying to find someone else to be a champion, something that they're passionate about. Because if you don't have someone passionate or has the time and interest to be a leader, it's going to be really painful and challenging to have a successful outcome, I guess.
Thank you.
anybody else got a thought? Well, you're not alone, Elizabeth. I can tell you that. I mean, just from talking to lots of community connectors, it is a challenge. There's a lot of different issues that engage churches because of the values that we hold in our different congregations, whether it's synagogues, mosques, temples. there's a lot of things, good things to work on in the justice community. Um,
Right.
So maybe the beginning can sometimes be partnering with something the church is on, or the congregation is already. I'm saying church because you identified yourself as a church, but any community, noticing what's already working, or an issue that's already compelling for that community. You know, if maybe immigration is a compelling issue, or perhaps
Yep.
housing and homelessness is an issue. You know, that the scary thing about the climate change being so large is also an advantage in the sense that climate touches so many different aspects of other justice issues. And so sometimes tagging onto something the congregation's already proud of and sees as their work can be a helpful way to do. Another option is to think about what problem can I help my congregation solve? Sometimes a congregation is spending money on styrofoam and disposable products, and you can help come up with a solution that cuts the budget in that area by implementing some new opportunity. Maybe everybody brings in their mug and hangs it on the wall, and then it's easily cleaned or something, and that replaces a cost center in the congregation. That can be a value. Any kind of value add that you can offer the church can sometimes
The
be
dishes get baptized. Yeah,
right. The dishes get
I've done that
can be-
before, where I brought my own dish instead of like using styrofoam.
That's a good one. Lee. So
Thank you.
great. Yeah, let's see who else hasn't had a chance. Janelle, you want to introduce yourself? And
Yes, I'm Janelle Hill from South Minneapolis. I go to Living Spirit United Methodist Church. And I was telling, I think his name is Eno, or probably not pronouncing it right, that we're kind of a little dying church. We had been struggling before the pandemic, but since that, our population has gone probably from 60, 65, 70 worshiping on a Sunday down to about 20 worshiping on a Sunday. So there's not much energy for doing climate. We do have a church garden, which we started about 7, 8 years ago, that is doing well. So that's a little bit of a good thing for our community. It's has community members and church members gardening. Other than that, not much is happening. We are involved with Beacon with housing, but there's just not much energy to do more than one thing at a time. Not the people to do it. So, and I'm probably
challenge, yeah.
leaving at the end of the year, looking for a church that's got
Oh.
more people in it to do more things.
And what is your congregation? I may have missed that.
Living Spirit United Methodist Church.
Oh, okay, yeah. You all looked at solar not too
Oh,
long
yes,
ago.
we had looked at solar. Yes, yes. And the guy of trustees has always said, oh yeah, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. But he's kind of person that doesn't really follow through, and it never has come, and now it's too late.
Does the Eco Spirit still go on there? I heard about it before.
What's that?
Does the Eco Spirit still go on?
Ego Spirit?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Sometimes when you're at that kind of stage where you're really struggling, simply having a gathering in which people talk about climate change and what's meaningful to them can re-spark interest and get people at least, it's like the big scary monster in the closet. And once you talk about it, it doesn't feel as scary. And you actually maybe can join together. But you're facing a challenge that a lot of congregations face.
Yeah, I think
Mainline
particularly
Christian.
now.
Yeah. So, but I mean, what better opportunity to revive a congregation than to bring people together to work on the most important issue of our day? Sometimes talking about that might revive some interest together. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
our
Janelle. Thank you.
pastor doesn't seem to have any interest in the area,
Well,
which doesn't help.
that can be a challenge. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you for sharing, Janelle.
sure.
Bob, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us
Yeah,
about
I'm
your?
Bob Morse from Ashland, Oregon, and I belong to the Quaker meeting there. I'm connected to MNIPL because I responded to the call in June of 2021 to go up to the Pipeline 3 action. And thank you. And follow up to that was a call from Green Faith that came for last October 18th, 2 weeks before the COP26. And it was so what happened is that I needed first to talk to our Quaker meeting about what is the Quaker response? What's the spiritual response to climate change? What do we bring to the table? Got a group and got a committee going. Quakers do committees really well, or so we did in the past. And about 50 people gathered with us outdoors for worship. And I thought everyone felt it was really positive and said, let us know what else you're doing this year from a spiritual perspective. It took me 8 months to get 5 of us together on an interfaith climate team. And at the same time, our Quaker meeting, which was quite thriving before COVID, began deconstructing. So we almost have like no committees now. Okay, I think there's a part of that's really positive because I think it's what's happening in the world. Doors closed so others can open. But I'm glad this call came at this time. I'm just curious. I'm delighted in some ways to hear that we're not the only congregation that's suffering. Of the 5 groups that came together for our interfaith climate team, our really large Presbyterian fellowship in our community was down to half, as large as it was before COVID. My own thinking right now, for when I go back, it looks like my road trip is at 12 weeks now. It'll probably be about 16 or 18 weeks before I get back to Ashland. But my own thinking is that instead of doing something with our congregation, is just for people of faith to come together and support one of our other many climate programs in town. Because it feels like we're almost dividing and conquering ourselves. So that's where I'm at. And yes, I do carry my own reusable utensils and plates. And at every hotel, I confront the people that run the restaurants there about when are they going to get back, or when are they going to begin to use reusables. And remind them when I travel in Canada that there's at least a recycling bin in every hotel room when there isn't in America. Mm-hmm. Those things feel like really fun things to have conversations about, but it feels like it's small compared to what needs to happen on the planet.
Thanks, Bob. I just want to highlight one aspect of what you said, which is just noting that while we have this concept of the community connector, in which a person connects with a particular congregation or faith community, we know that many folks out there are advocating and building the climate justice movement at large and may not be embedded in a particular faith community. And we welcome folks who are doing that as well, and want to strengthen the whole community together of people working for climate justice. So appreciate you raising that issue, and we just want to remark on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's see. We got a few more minutes. We might go a little bit over, but I want to give everybody a chance to see. Carolyn Anderson, we haven't heard from you. Want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Carolyn Anderson from Golden Valley, Valley Community Presbyterian Church. And I like what Bob just said about if you can't get your own congregation to do something, join with another community group that's already doing it, because they're probably having trouble getting people involved too. So Thank you. I wrote that down. Because it just does feel like there isn't much going on or much interest. Like Buff said, it's the kind of the issue of the world right now, and yet most people I talk to don't really even seem to know about it or care about it or do anything about it. And so it feels kind of lonesome sometime, but we do have a big community garden, which is going really well. And I started what I'm calling a sustainability group. And it's just working on, we're very good at the small things, at the local things, small things, and very active with immigration and a lot of things like that. But not the systemic part of it, which I think, I think MNIPL can do both. And so we have somebody coming in a couple of weeks to talk about the voting and vote your values. So hopefully that will draw some people in. And so there's a few positive things, but it's nice to hear what other people are doing too. So thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Linnea, you want to go?
Hi, I'm Linnea Swenson Tellickson. That's what the S and the T are for. And I am in a liminal space is what I feel like. I belong to Grace University Lutheran Church in Minneapolis. It's on the campus of the University of Minnesota. And I grew up and am living in right now, Duluth, Minnesota, at the end of the Lake Superior, taking care of my parents. And they belong to First Lutheran, but I'm kind of considering going to Gloria Dei. I believe the pastor there is involved with MNIPL. I came because right now I'm craving connection. And so, and I'm very passionate about racial and environmental equity. These are, that's the most important thing. And so I thought an opportunity to at least be on a Zoom screen with others would be, I welcomed that tonight, even though I was with my parents until right before I got on. So in that stage of life of parental care, and that does not diminish my care for the environment. So I don't know what to say. Our congregation has been through a lot of changes. We just got new pastors after 28 years. And so that's big. That's a big deal. And that they had to come during the pandemic. They were installed last October already, maybe. And we have certainly, I was part of a group. I was kind of leading, I guess, the environmental justice group for a while. And then then lately I've been the leader of our racial equity team, but those two, they're not two separate issues. And that's part of what I think about a lot. And I'm very, I guess people have talked about, the little things we do. That here in Duluth, I have to collect the compost and bring it to a drop-off site, but my parents and I do that. And in Minneapolis, I get to have it picked up. I have a backyard compost. And so, I think that when I'm hearing, I agree with, there's some really big systemic things that would need to be addressed, but we wouldn't have maybe the big systemic things. So, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for weighing in. I'd love to connect you with our Northland director, Brett Pence, who's there.
Okay.
His office is at Gloria Dei Lutheran.
Okay.
And he's got a good community of folks up there that you would fit right in with.
Well, good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Nice to meet you. Let's see, Inno, you want to introduce yourself and go?
Hi, my name is Enno Limpier. I am a pastor up at First Congregational Church in Grand Marais. I was married in First Congregational Church in Albuquerque. My first wife and we got married there. She grew up in Albuquerque. Her parents are Catholic, but they allowed us to get married in a congregational church. And then my wife right now is in South Dakota for it's going to be a couple of weeks because her mom just had surgery and then a mini stroke. So she's taking care of her parents there, or her mom there. So yeah, lots of connections. Right now, we're doing pretty good up here with our Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light group. We had a very successful Earth Day fair where on Earth Day, we went to the community center, had 28 booths, a bunch of speakers. They thought about 300 people showed up. Over the summer, we've been working on, there's 2 rain gardens that are along Highway 61 outside of the library, and with all the construction, they got neglected. So we're rehabbing them and got one done and starting to work on the other. And the Episcopal Church here proposed that we gather together our 2 churches and do a season of creation. So we're they started last week, we're starting this week, this coming week, of a season of creation, and we're going to do 2 worship services together. So this, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday, we're hosting Spirit of the Wilderness. They're coming to our church, and we're going to do a Lutheran jazz service. There's a local jazz player up here who's put together a communion liturgy, and he's changed a couple things to make it more creation oriented. But so Congregationalist Episcopalians are going to be worshiping to a Lutheran jazz service. And then the next week we will go up the hill and we'll be listening to Buff Grace as he preaches up here. So he's coming up to preach for us. And then then we'll go back to our separate things and close out with our churches during World Communion Sunday. So
Thanks, yeah, that's
some light shining forth up here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I want to just highlight for folks that, that I don't know if it sounds that way to you, but to me, that's a lot of things going on in that little community for creation care. It's really, really terrific. But I just want to point out that Eno and I had our first meeting about this more than 15 months ago. So it does take time. It takes persistence and commitment, and you don't get to enormous Earth Day celebration like that just overnight. You have to build relationships, and we really do have to do the work of organizing. So that's a great success story, but it took a lot of effort by a lot of different people, Eno and others up there in the Northland to pull that together. So great job, Eno. Well, we're kind of closing down time here. I want to make sure that I remind you of what's happening next month. Let's see, share my screen again, and just let you know that next month, our webinar, October 4th, first Tuesday of the month, will be on loss and damage. And I might introduce it this way. What do floods in Pakistan have to do with stocks on Wall Street and demonstrations in Cairo? Or what does the price of gas in Kansas have to do with prostitution in Tanzania and policy making in Egypt? If those things seem disparate to you, you might be surprised at how they fit together. And what does all that mean for our congregations and COP27, this UN gathering that's happening in the early weeks of November, where people and leaders from around the world are coming to Cairo, Egypt, to talk about climate crisis and what we do as a whole group together. So I hope you'll join us on October 4th. I appreciate all of you coming together this evening and sharing with one another. And and I'll turn it over to Joshua to close us out. You've got a comment there, Joshua.
Okay, I did want to make just a quick comment because I did my first breakout room with Elizabeth, and I wanted to say, worry not, right? Be like the lilies in the field, right? And God take care of them. God's going to take care of us too. And just wanted to give some best practice keys when it comes to organizing, especially in hard times. First, focus on what you can control, right? You can't control others' reactions or their participation. All you can control is how you are going about your strategy and carrying it out, right? So stay focused on that. Fret not, don't worry. Just as Buff said, if you try something and it doesn't work, then you've learned that, okay, this technique maybe didn't work, and you can build off of that and maybe take some things from it that you feel did work, right? And I have an acronym as well, EPIFU, which is just make a plan, right? Evaluate, survey the land, make a plan, implement that plan, and then analyze whatever data you can from that plan, right? Quantitative and qualitative, and then rinse and repeat. I'm on my porch with my automatic light that keeps shutting off. And then last is that principle of seek first to understand, right? There's going to be, I mean, you're in your congregations, there's going to be some collective issues that everyone has, and being able to draw out those and connect the dots of those to climate change, which climate change impacts everything. So there will be a way that you can coherently and simply connect the dots to what concerns folks may have that they're conscious of with climate change to get that participation. And I would say, and last is have fun with it, enjoy. Yes, it's an issue that's worrisome, but ultimately in celebration of our existence, right? Of our connection with God and with one another, right? Even as we engage in this activity of taking care of the earth, we should do so with happiness, with jubilation, with adulation, that we know that there's a better way, that we know there's value in the earth, and we know that we can make a difference in protecting it and improving the prospects of tomorrow. But it was great meeting all of you guys and hearing some of your stories as well about the churches. And I look forward to talking to you guys next time. But thank you very much.